Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Only Stupid Answers. Today we are reviewing the first episode of Lovecraft Country on HBO, and I've got a very special guest with me, RB3. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this show. It's one of my favorites of the year, for sure.
So wait, that's great. For some reason, I thought like it's the beginning of the year just because time's so weird right now. I'm like, yeah, the new shows. Wait, nope. The year's almost over, actually.
Right.
It feels like we're just starting. We're not. We've been in the year for a minute. And you might have noticed that I said he's joining me tonight. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're probably checking it out in the morning. But you can watch these episodes live with us on patreon.com/onlystupidanswers and join us in the chat. We got a bunch of people joining us tonight. And thank you all for coming down. So before we get started, before we dive into Lovecraft Country, RB3, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell the audience at home who you are and where they can find you.
Hi, thanks for having me. DJ, I really appreciate being here. You can find me at First Cut, my YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, where I do with Andres Ace Cabrera and Sabrina Ramirez. We talk about movies, we do movie reviews, we have our podcast, The Meaning of Podcast, where we talk about filmmakers and the deeper meaning inside of their work. And we've had people like Josh Trank on. Last week we had Lindsay Ellis on, so the great video essayist. Check out our podcast, The Meaning of, our YouTube channel, First Cut. And I'm actually so excited to talk about this show. I actually help my man Dorian on Geeks of Color, and we do video reviews for the first couple of episodes of Lovecraft Country. So, if you want to watch those, they're at the Geeks of Color YouTube channel. And if you want to get more Lovecraft Country goodness,
go over there, check it out, give it some love, give it some support, and let us know in the comments down below what you thought of the first episode. So we're going to be talking about just the first episode, season 1, episode 1, Sundown. The synopsis is as follows. Atticus Freeman meets up with his friend Letitia and his uncle George to embark on a road trip across 1950s Jim Crow America in search of his missing father. And the episode was directed by Yann Demange, hope I pronounced that right, and written by Jonathan Kidd, Jordan Peele, and Sonia Winton, and was created by Misha Green, based on the novel by Matt Ruff. So as we pick up in the 1950s, Atticus is just coming home to find his missing father. As we dive into this, what were your overall thoughts of this first episode?
Well, I really didn't know what to expect going in. When you hear names like Jordan Peele and J.J. Abrams, it's obviously something to get excited about, but I didn't really know the premise. I usually do this thing where I don't really watch trailers at all.
Same.
So I didn't even know what this was for the majority going in. So when I got in and I strapped in and I got the general understanding of the premise, it was super surprising to me. One, because I didn't know a lot of the history of H.P. Lovecraft, right?
Yeah.
So you obviously know his influence as a great science fiction writer and fantasy writer, and as creator of all these iconic images and creature designs and all that kind of stuff. But then, when you look deeper into the history of this dude, he was super, super racist.
Yes.
Hyper problematic.
Oh, yeah.
Hyper anti-Semitic. And yeah, it was really, and it just, and this show kind of not only plays into that, but it kind of internalizes that and retextualizes the horror that he was kind of writing and repurposes it in the context of 1950s America, which I think is one of the most creative ways you could have went with this kind of story. To me personally, a lot of people are comparing it to Watchmen. I wouldn't necessarily compare it to Watchmen, but what I do compare it to is the episode of Watchmen, episode 6, when it's the flashback to the young hooded justice and his plight as a black superhero during the early days of during the days of segregation and racial discrimination in the 1950s and 60s. That's what I compare this to. It's it's adding a new layer to a story we're already familiar with, but in a new context and with a new set of conflicts. So to me, it's so powerful, it's mind blowing, and it's just so happened to be really fun and entertaining too. So I'm loving the heck out of it.
Absolutely. And to dive a little bit more into that, obviously people might be familiar with Lovecraft for stuff, specifically his Cthulhu mythos. But yeah, if you go back into not even just his journal entries, which are brought up a lot, but his work in general is super racist. And I think the best thing that could happen for Lovecraft's work and fans of his work in particular is that it is now in the public domain. So people are, not only does it propagate his best ideas, but you also get an opportunity for people that were influenced by his work, but do not like his personal views, they get to use his work to kind of combat those views. So for an example of that, last year when Sam and I were at Fantastic Fest, we saw a movie called Color Out of Space, which was directed by Richard Stanley, who might be best known for trying valiantly and failing to direct a film adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau. And there was a Q&A after Color Out of Space where he answered questions about the movie and the fact that one of the lead protagonists is black. The opening scene is a woman doing a very feminine Wiccan ceremony, which he admitted was all a pretty direct middle finger to H.P. Lovecraft's closed-minded views on matters like that. And Lovecraft Country is similar to that in that it's now taking that mythos and focusing on black leads in segregated America, and I think that's I personally cannot imagine a better way to utilize, because we are living in a time where a lot of creators we like are being exposed to being awful people, and then the question is, how do you separate the creator from the creation? And I think it's very cool to see people that like aspects of the Lovecraft mythos using that to create art that he would not support and not be a fan of. But screw that guy. Screw those views. Forget that. But keep the cool squid monsters. So it's cool to see that with it. I like this trend that we're seeing, and I think it's a very creative way to use that mythology. The title of the show is Lovecraft Country, and that comes from a term that was first coined by Keith Herber and was popularized by Chaosium, which is they produced a Lovecraft-inspired role-playing game, and it very much specifically references the part of New England that Lovecraft liked to place a lot of his stories, like Stephen King, who likes to use the same locations over and over again. Lovecraft was very similar, and so that's where the term Lovecraft Country comes from, and of course that is where our protagonist Atticus is headed in the story. We also have Journey Smollett, who plays Letty, and of course you may recognize her as Black Canary in Birds of Prey, and Courtney B. Vance, who is an actor I love and everything. He's also in Project Power as Captain Crane. He gets a little bit more to do here, but he was also Johnny Cochran in American Crime Story, and he's tremendous in that, and he's amazing in this. There was a moment, not to jump too far ahead, but there's a moment when he's looking at a picture of his wife, and I'm like, that's the stuff people that die in movies do. And I was a little worried that we were going to off him in the first episode. I'm like, don't take Courtney B. Vance away from me in the first episode. Please don't.
Yeah.
They didn't. Thankfully, they didn't. Before we get into that, what did you think about the time we spent in Chicago?
Well, I thought that was some of my favorite parts of the episode. I think that's where we get a lot of character information that I think informs a lot of the storytelling going forward. For one, I think the journey to Chicago for our main character Atticus is interesting too, right? The idea of him just from the jump, right? Like the whole dream sequence of how you get an understanding of how much this dude loves sci-fi fantasy. Like he dreams about it. He dreams of the aliens. He dreams of the tentacle monsters. He dreams of all of it.
Yeah.
But then, in Lovecraft stories, the hero is not somebody who he can identify with necessarily.
Yeah.
He in his dream, he literally has to put in Jackie Robinson because that's the only black hero that was prevalent during that time. So when you look at that and then you see the harsh reality of the world that he really lives in a world where he's taking a bus that breaks down and he's not going to get a ride going any further, he has to walk the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Takes you into the harsh reality that is the escapism that these sci-fi books promise. So then, you get great character work there. You get great character work with Courtney B. Vance's character, learning that he's like he's a family man who is in love with his wife and his and all of these like beautiful aspects of like black love that you're seeing just permeate throughout the beginning of it. And then you meet Letitia, which is funny because that's actually my mom's name. So I don't know why I forgot her name. And Letty and her character, when she enters the scene, there's like this mixed reaction, right? Like, and that's how you could tell if a character is really well written is like the reaction of other characters around them. Yeah. And when she comes in, she's, she gets like a mixed reaction. A lot of people are like, "Yay, Letty's back," and then a lot of people are like, "Oh no, now she's here again." Mm-hmm. So it kind of leaves up a lot of mystery to what's going to happen next. So everything that they set up in the beginning and sequences in Chicago sets up a lot that you have to care about later on with these characters when they're in the face of danger. So absolutely. I thought all that stuff was really well done.
Yeah, and also specifically a standout character for me that was in Chicago was Letty's sister Ruby, who their interaction was fantastic. And I was like, man, I want more Ruby. Unfortunately, not to give too many spoilers, but if you watch the preview for upcoming episodes, it does look like we get to spend more time in Chicago and specifically with Ruby, which I was very grateful for. And also, speaking of Courtney B. Vance's family, Uncle George, he plays Uncle George. His daughter her art is better than every artist working in the 50s, except maybe Jack Kirby. Like her art is like looking at that, I was like, dang, that's like modern comic art. I would buy that comic now. Yeah. And so they get in the Woody, which beautiful car. If you're going to have a road movie, you need a cool car. They commit to the cool car. I also like Letty pointing out when she sees adult Atticus, she's like, "That was scrawny Atticus?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, that doesn't look like any book nerd I've ever met, but sure, we'll go with it. It looks like Captain America, but okay." The second they hit the road, we kind of get a picture of 1950s America for black people traveling through the country. And spoiler, it's not great for anybody that needs a brush up on their history.
Which was a great sequence too, though. Great montage.
Absolutely. And it does a good job of setting the tone. Like a lot of pilots, you can kind of feel it trying to find how it wants to tell the story. Like there's a brief moment where it cuts to a modern rap song, and it was one of those like, I don't know if the rest of the show is stylized enough to warrant that, but like like a lot of good pilots, as it goes on, you can feel it finding like, oh, this is how we're telling the story, and does a good job of getting you excited to continue on. We have two really cool car chases. One, they stop in a diner that used to be friendly to black Americans and now is very clearly no longer. And we get a little history lesson on why the White House was painted white, which leads to very early on, Uncle George is like, doesn't want Letty to drive, and she proves to be a pretty good driver in a pinch. And then later we get some interactions with let's say, hostile sheriff that kind of gets us into some of the more supernatural elements. But the first car chase ends with a car that we were talking about. This like kind of it's not a futuristic car, but it's silver like a rocket, and it appears to it cuts off the car that's chasing our protagonist, and it appears to have a shield or uses some sort of like I don't know. What did you think about watching that scene? Because when I was watching, I was like, wait, what did the car hit? The car that was chasing that flipped. What did it hit?
Because it didn't hit the car. The car was untouched. Yeah. It just kind of flew over it. I wondered that too. I mean, that's obviously the mystery box, right? And that's the J.J. Abrams concept of like setting up the mystery and what's going to happen next. I'm super curious. I know, like, if you after seeing the first episode, I went back and I actually did watch the trailer, and the trailers do show you there's going to be a lot more supernatural elements and a lot more things that are going to be there to look forward to that they just showed in the first episode that they didn't show in the first episode. But this was one of those moments where I was like, wait, what? Like, this is because from this point, that point is mainly just a normal show. But the first not a normal show, but a race drama with a dream sequence in the beginning. But then that's when it kind of makes a little bit of a turn of like, oh, this is something a little different. It leads to a lot of curiosity. I wonder what's her motivations. I know, there's query as to what's going to happen when they actually make it to Lovecraft Country. What's going to happen when they actually find the father, who's played by Michael Kenneth Williams, who's one of the finest actors in the entire world. So I wonder when we get to that point, is she going to have something to do with him? Is that going to be part of the mystery as well, or is that something completely separate? I don't know, but it just gets me more excited.
Absolutely, and I think that also, that's one of our first, other than the dream sequence, which, by the way, I would watch an entire show of Jackie Robinson flipping around bashing monsters with his bat. I see it as like it could be a really cool anime show, and I'd watch it.
Oh yes.
Other than the dream sequence, which we also get hints at Atticus's time in the Korean War. Which my grandfather served in, and was from what I know, I'm no expert, but from what I understand, is pretty bloody. Not a great conflict to be a part of. War, it's weird, but we also get hints of that he has a connection to somebody from Korea that might be played by Jamie Chung, who also, I believe, if I caught it right, was the pink-skinned alien in the dream as well. So we'll see how that all plays out.
I see.
So we get the dream sequence. It's our early go for broke. We got references to War of the Worlds. We got references to Star Trek with the pink-skinned alien babe. We got direct references to Cthulhu. We get the car. But most of the horror we see up until the end is dealing with racism in America. And one of the biggest examples of that is the scene with Atticus, Letty, and Uncle George with the sheriff. And he gives them, we get the title of the episode, he gives them till sundown to leave the county. And I don't know about you, but when they cross the train tracks, I'm like, well, he could still mess with, not to get too political or whatever, but like, we don't stop cops now from messing with people. So even then I don't know why he's stopping at the train tracks. And of course it doesn't go well for them. They get stopped at a police barricade, and I guess they use the term gypsies, but they're just looking for any outsider that they can pin a crime on. Before we get to the monsters, what did you think about all of that?
Again, I think that was the powerful part of the episode. That's actually, to me, my favorite part of the episode was that sheriff car chase that happened. I think that, to me, just goes to show, even though the show and this series is all about the mythical and the science fiction, is really about the horror of the Black experience, right? Like the horror of being someone who is Black or from African American or African descent in this country during the 1950s, during the segregation era, which, by the way, when we see George Freeman taking notes in his book and he's going to the restaurant to eat there, he's going there because he is an editor for the Negro Motorist Green Book, right? Like the actual Green Book that was a way for Black people to navigate through the country in a safe way. And, even though it hadn't been published yet, and I'm sure that's like a fictionalized part of the show that's is just taking a nod in the wing to, it shows you that even as much as the show prioritizes the fantasy and the sci-fi, also prioritizes the real life historical context of the situations that are going on. Absolutely. And that scene was just another prime example of just being bullied by police, being brutalized by an oppressive force that, is looking to, destroy you. And again, that's scarier than the actual horror itself. And, that's something that I've always applauded Jordan Peele for as a creator, especially for Get Out. To me, that's the best part of Get Out is at the very end. Even though you had this whole supernatural horror thing happening with the sunken place and all that, the scariest part of that movie is at the end when the police car pulls up and you're not sure what's going to happen next. That's the scariest part of that movie, and that's at play here. And I think the show creator Misha Green, did a great job in highlighting that too. So
Absolutely.
I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and if you've ever seen the alternate ending of Get Out, I'm glad he changed it because especially at the time that movie came out, I was like, yeah, that was the right call. But yeah, and I think I'm always impressed when you know, obviously we get a lot of like high speed car chases in movies. Whenever you can do a low speed car chase and it make it just as tense, I find that really impressive. And another thing, I think
it keeps you on the edge longer. Actually,
absolutely.
Too. That's what I felt like.
Absolutely. And I also, they do a good job of navigating something that could have hamstrung the pilot a little bit, because there's 3 moments where our heroes get in a jam and an outside force rescues them. And a lot of times that could make your protagonist seem incompetent. But they do a good job of, you know, in the initial car chase before the silver car shows up, Letty's doing a great job driving. Atticus is out the window shooting at their attackers. These people look capable and prepared. They're just each time they're facing an overwhelming force. Same thing when they're surrounded by the police in the woods and things are not going to go well for them. And then the monsters show up and we don't get a name for the monsters. But it seems to be a direct reference to the Shoggoth, which Atticus mentions earlier as blobs with eyes. And Letty has a really funny line talking about like, we can outrun blobs with eyes. Not these ones, not whatever these are. George relates them to vampires. Afrin asks, would you define the woodland creatures as vampire-like monsters or something else? What did you think of the monsters?
Oh, I thought the monsters were really cool. I mean, I thought that was, if it is a vampire type, it's a different spin on a vampire. Again, I'm not familiar with the Lovecraftian references particularly. Like obviously the big stuff, and like the iconic stuff that you see at the beginning of this episode. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's one of his creations or if that's something that was created in the show or in the book that this is based off. I'm not sure what exactly it is, but I think it is funny that, if it isn't something directly related to like vampires, it's funny that it's like, that's the reference, because that's the most understandable.
Yeah. So. I think you're right. I think it's the most relatable, and it's also a good way to quickly like lay out the rules of like light. They don't like it. You get bitten, you get transformation, which I thought the sheriff's transformation into one of the monsters was great. And I also like the moment where like, hey, you need to. They're talking to the deputy and like, you need to shoot that guy, and then he literally rips off the deputy's lower jaw in a very visceral and violent moment. And if these are the Shoggoth, they are part of the Cthulhu mythos created by H.P. Lovecraft. They showed up in the fungi from Yuggoth. It was a different time. Pulp novels were titled differently. And they are described in detail at the Mountains of Madness. Yeah, I thought the monster sequence was really cool, and I thought the way it transitioned from the scenes with the local law enforcement to the monsters was really handled really well and really escalated tension in a really cool way. And then we get a scene where Letty books it to the car, brings it back to them, and they use road flares to bring the monsters back. And then there's a mysterious whistle that seems to call the monsters off. And that was the third moment where it's like somebody saving them, but the work they had to do to stay safe until that moment shows that our protagonists are capable, shows that they're smart, shows that they're on top of their stuff. But I do wonder, after that scene, they show up at an opulent mansion with literally probably the whitest person I have ever seen in my entire life answers the door. And the sense I get, because he also is very blonde and very blue-eyed, like the woman that got out of the silver car from the earlier car chase. And he says he was expecting them. That this all ties to hints at Atticus's birthright, which we get early in the episode, and how he might tie into all this. And speaking of Jordan Peele, I very much got Get Out vibes, where it's like, yeah, they're welcoming you in, but don't trust these people. Don't trust them.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's very much a very I definitely get that too. Don't trust him at all. Don't go inside. But maybe that's the next step of the journey. Maybe that's the next part of the hero's journey story. And I think to me that's what I found interesting in this monster sequence is I think it really highlights the hero's journey for a lot of these characters, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from the beginning of the series, and I remember I'm from the beginning of this episode when the main character when he was talking about how he always wants to see himself as a hero through through these stories. He always saw himself as that hero, and he's developing into that hero. And then whereas Courtney B. Vance's character, he comes at this as like the wise elder figure who has been battle tested, not necessarily through monsters, but through just being a black man in this country, and he's already had that battle, and he's willing to keep fighting it. And then meanwhile, Letty's character, and I gotta salute the Blair girl Karama. When we did our review for Geeks of Color, she mentioned the fact that Letty, when the white officers are trapped in that house with these characters, they don't let Courtney B. Vance's character run away, or they don't let the main character run away, and the main character they don't let him or Courtney B. Vance escape. They're more than willing to let the woman go, though. They're more than willing to let the black woman be the disposable figure in this case, because they think that if a black man's going to go out there and try and get the car and save their lives, that they're going to run off and escape. And there's this kind of narrative that the black woman is more submissive and more subservient to white officers and white authority. So it still plays on a racial dynamic in a very powerful way, even inside of this kind of more mystical sequence. So I think that's going to be even more at play when we get more information about what's inside of the house and what's going to happen to that extent. It's probably going to be more commentary layered on top of the horror that we're going to experience in those moments.
Definitely. Yeah, and even you talk about that narrative, we even get a sign of the Aunt Jemima billboard, with all of that stuff as well.
I was going to say, that's the new period detail now. When they have the Aunt Jemima thing, that's the new period detail for sure.
It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of, obviously this stuff has kind of become a flashpoint currently, but the amount of time, the hundreds of years of dealing with these same issues, and it's interesting that on the one hand, the creators of this couldn't have known how timely this would be, but unfortunately, it's like always, it's like perma-timely, which hopefully it won't be in the future. That'd be great. That'd be really cool. Speaking of the future of the show and where things go moving forward, we got a question here from Ethan Schaff. What kind of things are you expecting to see in the show going forward? Creatures, social analogies, stuff like that.
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. Personally, I think that's what the at least the pilot has thrived in showing the social dynamics on top of the creatures and the fun and the fantasy. I think that's what at least gets me the most excited. But I do hope that it does. I hope that it doesn't become like repetitive or redundant to any kind of extent either. I do think the creators behind the show are creative enough to imagine enough different scenarios and ways that these subject matters could be approached in ways that are variable, and ways that are not like traditional or standard. And I think they've done a great job of breaking expectations before. So that's why I always have a hard time like predicting what's going to happen next, because to me, if it's good storytelling, I don't want to be able to predict what happens next. And I think far, I don't think there's anything to predict so far, for me at least. So,
well, I don't know about similar to you. I don't know about predicting so much. Again, under my own, if I were just watching the show on my own, I would never watch the what's coming up. But for this show, I did. And I was surprised at seeing, going back to Chicago a little bit and seeing some of the characters we set up here outside of our core trio getting involved and stuff, which interests me a little bit. Obviously, I was excited to see Michael Kenneth Williams. I was concerned that since he's the missing dad, it's like we're going to get like a 10-minute scene with him at the end of the last episode. It's like, no, it looks like he's in it more than that, which is great. And as far as what I want to see, I was surprised that we reached Artem so quickly, and I kind of hope we don't lose the road trip angle, because I think as a form of narrative, I like that a lot. I like the road trip narrative. I like the group of mismatched characters on a journey together, and I like not only do you get the period aspects, which is always fun to see, but also the more realistic and accurate period aspects that are darker and more informative and more relevant to our current time than anybody would like to admit. So I hope we, it's not a prediction, but I kind of hope we don't lose that. As far as final thoughts on this episode, I thought that again, it's like a pilot. It's finding its footing, and in some ways, it's kind of your standard dark fantasy adventure, uplifted by its very relevant historical topics and current topics and all that stuff. But it does what a good pilot does, where it gets me very invested in, and its promise for what's coming up next. It's like, just you wait, we got the good stuff coming up. Makes me really interested to see where we go next. And I'm immediately riveted. And also does the great thing that I think every show needs to do, is that you need to nail your core cast, your core ensemble. And I think you couldn't do better than Jonathan Majors, Journey Smollett, and Courtney B. Vance.
Absolutely.
I immediately am engaged with all these characters. I love them. I'm rooting for them. I want to see them overcome the struggles that they've got. So I'm very excited to see where this show goes. Excuse me. RB3, what about you? What are your any final thoughts you have about this episode?
Final thoughts. I think so far it's off to a great start. I believe it has a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Amazing.
Last time I checked, and then as it's really well deserved. I think the show lives up to the hype, and I think I'm excited to see what goes forward. The only thing that worries me a little bit, even though as much as I love J.J. Abrams for the way he sets up shows, I don't necessarily love the things that he does in terms of the way, some things end necessarily.
Yes.
So, that's the one thing that's getting me a little hesitant. But I think, the minds behind this, including the creator, Misha Green, and, all the directors and writers behind it. I know the director of this episode, Jan, excuse me, I might be pronouncing his name, Jan Demenge. He obviously did the great independent movie 71, which I thought was amazing. And he also did the movie Top Boy and all that, or I'm sorry, the TV show Top Boy and all that kind of stuff. So he has a good track record, and I think this is another good addition into that. I'm excited to see where the story in this show goes forward, because I think the spectacle is there, the social commentary is there, the characters are there, and everything's there for something to be really, really great and special.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Before we go, remind everybody at home where they can find you and what you're up to.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3. What I'm up to, we have the Meaning of podcast every week, every Friday. We talk about a different filmmaker, a different franchise, TV show, whatever it is. Like I said, we had Lindsay Ellis on last week. Great guests like Josh Trank, Ed Greer, and a lot of great people, Winston Marshall, and Joel Monique as well. So we've had really, really great guests recently. And also you can find me on Geeks of Colors YouTube channel doing reviews for Lovecraft Country every week as well.
Awesome. And of course, you can find me at DJ Talks Trash. If you want to know more about the show, you can follow us at Only Stupid Answers. On Twitter, you're going to want to yank the vowels out of stupid. Please join us on patreon.com/Only Stupid Answers. You can get reviews like this early. You can watch them live and be a part of the discussion and give us questions that we can answer on the show. And a new podcast every Monday morning. Everywhere podcasts are sold or whatever. Everywhere you like to listen to your podcast, you can find those. In the most recent episode, Maud Garrett joins us, and we have a cool discussion about that and playing tabletop RPGs in the time of a pandemic. But let us know in the comments down below what you thought about this episode of Lovecraft Country. If you'd like to see more reviews from us on this. Also, if you've read the book, I would be very interested in hearing from you on what your thoughts on how the show compares to the book. And as always, thank you all for joining us. Stay tuned. like, subscribe, all that jazz, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.